There's a lot of talk nowadays about fake polyglots. That is, YouTubers who claim to be speaking 15, 20, or 25 languages, or claiming that they have learned a language in 2, 3, or 4 weeks. And I understand your skepticism. I understand your irritation, because your skepticism and your irritation are actually also mine. I've been learning 4 languages over the last 35 years, and I take language learning really seriously. I believe that anyone can become a polyglot. Anyone can speak a bunch of languages if they know how to do it, but also if they, take the time, and it's going to be a long period of time, to learn these languages to a high level. So today I wanted to share some reflections and some emotions I went through when I watched back in the day a video of a show that happened in 1997 where they portrayed what was supposed to be the best polyglot in the world at the time. And spoiler alert, it did not go well. I think it takes a polyglot to judge a polyglot. I consider myself a polyglot, that is a person who speaks a bunch of languages, because I've been doing this my whole life. And I think that I can offer some perspective on what happened that fateful day. The year is 1997. We have here our very same Ziad Fazah in flesh and blood, ready to showcase his amazing language skills. He was invited because he had appeared as the best polyglot in the world, speaking 59 languages in the Guinness World Records. And here we are. Let's get started.
Bien, en verdad nací con un talento divino, al cual me posibilitar aprender los idiomas del mundo en 3 años.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, he said, basically, I have a divine talent bestowed on me by God. And that's not a very modest thing to say. I mean, you can boast about the fact you speak languages, but I think that, first of all, a polyglot should be humble, because the more languages you know, the more you realize how little you actually know, not only of these languages, but of the remaining languages of the world. And then he said, I learned the languages of the world, in the sentence, los idiomas del mundo, in 3 years. So it's not very clear what he's referring to when he talks about the languages of the world, and then in 3 years. That's a very bold claim. This claim is even bolder than just saying I got a divine talent. Imagine if the likes of Steve Kaufman or Stu J. Ray or Professor Orgwellis or Richard Simkut, for that matter, just answered, hey, I got a divine talent. I'm the best polyglot in the world, and you guys have to bow in front of me. So that's not a great start, but let's see what happens next.
Cuando tenía 11 años, descubrí ese talento y después empecé a aprender todos los idiomas. Y de los 58 idiomas, ¿cuál es que más le costó aprender?
So he said, I discovered the talent, and then I discovered this talent, and then I learned all the languages. So he's still referring to the languages, or all the languages of the world. It's not really clear. Maybe he's going to clarify later. And then he gets this question, which I get asked all the time: what is the most difficult language you've learned so far? Which is a very typical question that polyglots get. So the question is actually, what is the most difficult language, and which one or which ones do you master?
Todos me interesan, pero el más difícil es el chino mandarín, porque su escrita son ideogramas, gramática muy simple, y los idiomas también occidentales que me interesan, tales como el francés, alemán, por causa de las ciencias políticas, la literatura y otras cosas culturales.
So basically he said Mandarin Chinese is the most difficult language. He had no doubt about that. And I have to say that this is a common myth, that Mandarin Chinese is the most difficult language in the world. It's daunting, it's intimidating for sure, because it has characters and it has tones. So it's a difficult language to learn from a point of view of a Westerner, or someone who speaks European languages in particular and has never learned a tonal language. I think it's difficult for Japanese and Koreans, for example, as well. But I think that Mandarin Chinese, as far as I'm concerned, as an Italian, and who's got a lot of European languages under his belt, it's not the most difficult language that I've encountered. For me, Japanese and Turkish are way more difficult because of their syntax. So the way you arrange words to form sentences, to form meaning, because it's all over the place, especially for Japanese. It's literally, they think backwards. So for me, Japanese has been much more, was and still is to today, much more difficult than Mandarin Chinese, which has its tones and characters, which are difficult, but it has a very straightforward syntax. So you just say, I want to go China, literally to say, I want to go to China. And this definitely helps for, to learn the language or to form sentences.
Bueno, pero nosotros hemos invitado a la platea de nuestro programa a algunos extranjeros residentes en nuestro país que irán conversando con usted, Ziad, para justamente ver sus habilidades lingüísticas. En primer lugar, se encuentra con nosotros el señor Sami Salem, encargado de...
So you can see he said perfectamente, so he meant, I guess, that's great, let's do it. But you can tell here that he's a little bit worried, right? You can already tell he's a little bit concerned, apprehensive, I would say, about the whole situation because, and I know this for a fact, because he said it later, he says it later in the video, and he will talk about this after the show happened, that they had not warned him about the fact that he would talk to these people and he would have to listen to these languages or recognize the languages and engage in a conversation. You can see he's slightly concerned.
De Asuntos Consulares de la Embajada de Egipto en Chile. Así es que yo quisiera pedirle a don Sami que le haga una pregunta a Ziad.
طبعا متهيألي اللغة العربية سهلة بالنسبة لك جدا فهسألك سؤال بسيط يعني بقالك كام يوم في تشيلي وإيه رأيك في البلد هنا؟
والله
Antes que nada, ¿qué fue lo que le preguntó?
Sì, mi preguntò quanto tempo sto qui in Cile, quanto tempo vai ficar. Sì, desculpe, sto parlando in portoghese, desculpe. Por favor, puede repetir. No, bueno.
السؤال لما أسألك يعني بقالك كام يوم هنا في تشيلي وإيه انطباعك عن البلد؟
Sì. ¿Cuánto tiempo estoy aquí en Chile y cuál es, qué hay de la situación del país de Chile?
Perfecto. Y ahora contéstele entonces en egipcio.
cortito.
والله أنا حبيت البلد كتير وشعبه لطيف ودمس الأخلاق.
¿Qué te contestó?
Dice que ¿a dónde dejó estacionado el camello?
So there's a guy in the background who just throws jokes here and there. And he says, someone asks, what is it that he asked you? What is it that Ziad asked you? And he goes like, where did you put the camel? It's just kind of funny and everybody laughs.
Don Sami, ¿qué le contestó?
Con micrófono, por favor.
Eso, cómelo.
Que le gustó mucho el país, encontró el pueblo muy agradable, muy amistoso con los
O sea,
extranjeros.
el egipcio, ok, extraordinario.
Sí.
Habla en árabe, no en dialecto egipcio.
So there's an important point here, and that is that this guy is from Egypt, and Ziad Fazah is from Lebanon, and they speak two different versions of Arabic. People call them dialect, but as a matter of fact, these are different languages. So this guy spoke in what I think is Egyptian Arabic, which is a very popular version of Arabic in the Arabic world because everybody watches TV shows in Egyptian Arabic. And Ziad Fazah gets back to him in standard modern standard Arabic. And that is kind of the vernacular language, lingua franca of the Arabic world that in reality nobody speaks, but everybody understands because they learn it at school and they watch TV. The TV, like for example, Al Jazeera is in modern standard Arabic. This is also one of the reasons why I have not learned Arabic to this day, because I love interacting with people. I love connecting with people. I like to see the surprise in people's eyes when they speak their language very well with a native-like accent. And I kind of get the impression that speaking modern standard Arabic at some bazaar in some Arabic country is like a little bit like speaking Latin in Rome. And people are not going to connect with it because, yes, it's a language that people use in order to understand each other, but it doesn't spark the interest, so to speak. So you have to learn modern standard Arabic and on top of that, a specific dialect or language, local language, say Morocco or Tunisia or Egypt or Lebanon. So it's a lot of work. You have to learn two languages, and still you will be understood. If you speak one local dialect or one local language, you will be understood only in that specific country, unless it's Egypt or I think also Lebanon. It's pretty popular. It's widely understood.
árabe con dialecto libanés.
También le va a pedir ahí, don...
Oh yeah, he said now he specified Arabic with a Lebanese accent. So he replied in his own. He didn't reply in modern standard Arabic. He replied in Lebanese. Again, I cannot really distinguish between modern standard Arabic, Levantine Arabic, and Egyptian Arabic, but you get the picture.
Don
También
Sami,
puede hablar directo.
porque nos acompaña la corresponsal del Canal Nacional de Finlandia, la periodista, ojalá le apunte yo, que se llama Aule Leskinen. Pregúntele por favor lo que quiera, señora Aule Anciar.
En finlandés.
Koko maailmassa on noin 5 miljoonaa ihmistä, jotka puhuvat suomen kieltä. Varmaan myös tiedätte, että Suomessa puhutaan virallisesti suomea, ruotsia.
You can see this guy's face, like he's like opening his mouth as what the hell is going on here? What language is this? He's probably never heard this language and the sounds produced by the sounds of this beautiful language.
Ja saamen kieltä.
You can tell he's nervous. He wants to reply as soon as possible. This is normally a normal reaction when you don't speak a language well. That's the impression I have, and I also react like that when someone, for example, I engage in a conversation in a language I still don't speak well. I tend to speak too much to fill in the gaps because sometimes I'm scared of that people ask me stuff that I don't understand. That's probably his case.
Te varmaan myös tunnette suomalaista kulttuuria. Nyt kysyn teiltä, mistä pidätte eniten suomalaisessa kulttuurissa? Mikä on Suomessa parasta?
Ya. ¿Qué le dijo?
En verdad me dijo que cómo pude, por ejemplo, aprender el idioma finlandés, porque es totalmente un idioma de otra origen extranjera, y cómo yo me siento aprendiendo este idioma siendo de una otra cultura diferente.
Ahora contesten en
Finlandés.
en finlandés. Aquí te quiero ver.
Bien.
En finés.
Aquí te quiero ver means like now let's see what's going to happen.
Man tosin man opit suomea kun me kuukausi kotimise ei koskaan Helsingisse ajat. Ei kukaan minä auta hallita suomea.
¿Qué le dijo?
Nos perdimos bastante, porque yo dije que en todo el mundo hay como aproximadamente 5 millones de personas que hablan finés y que él dice que es uno de nosotros que hablamos finés y que además de eso en Finlandia se habla también sueco y sami, que es lengua indígena finlandesa. Y entonces yo quería saber qué es lo mejor en Finlandia a su juicio, qué es lo que le gusta más.
¿Y qué le contestó él?
Él me contestó diciendo que ha estudiado 3 meses finés y que en la capital, en Helsinki, nadie le había prestado ayuda para en la comprensión de finés. Así que yo pienso que se perdió un poco o bastante en realidad en lo que yo le pregunté.
So a couple of comments before we move on to the next language is, first of all, the fact that Ziad managed to reply something to get his point across, and it was understandable because the lady definitely understood what he meant and what he said, and it was kind of I wouldn't go so far as to say it was complex, but it was elaborate. He was in Helsinki, etc., etc. So that is an indication that he did learn the language. He knows something of the language. But the other thing is, when it comes to his listening comprehension, you cannot fake it. You can maybe know some words in order to have a conversation. You can remember some stuff. But when it comes to listening comprehension, if you haven't listened to the language enough, if you haven't reached what I call a critical mass, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to understand a language that you haven't heard in a long time and that you're not very familiar with. So there's the second thing, and the impression I have is that Ziad Fazah, of course, understood little of what the lady said. Maybe he got a couple of words. I also got like miljoon, Suomi, which is the Finnish. Gelda, I guess it's language. Suomi gelda. I hear this all the time. So he kind of extrapolated some information from these words, and then he thought, let's come up with the most likely answer. Because he thought, oh, maybe she asked me about Maybe she asked me about how I've learned Finnish, what it's been my experience with Finnish, which is a typical, question or questions you get in a first interaction. So he was thinking, okay, didn't understand much, got a couple of words. Let's reply with something that looks like a likely answer. And it did not go well, so he did not understand, but at the same time, he managed to have at least some interaction in Finnish. So he did learn the language. To what extent? I am not sure.
En Irán, en persa.
En Farsi, idioma, el nombre oficial de nuestro idioma es Farsi.
Farsi. إلى إيران مزركة إلى خالة فرحمة.
This guy's is less diplomatic than the Finnish lady. He's already shaking his head and saying, we're not going in the right direction.
دور طوانا شيد بدان يا سدنالي توجدان.
Oye, párense ese el himno. ¿Está bien?
Bueno, la verdad, conoce los alfabéticos de idioma arábigo, pero que Farsi es otro idioma y la verdad, yo le doy como que pudo leer 5% de lo que representa 100% idioma Farsi.
Definitely less diplomatic than the Finnish lady. It's interesting to notice that in Farsi or Farsi, Persian, they have the same alphabet. They use the same alphabet than in Arabic. While in other languages, like for example Turkish, it used to have the Arabic alphabet, but I think Ataturk, if I'm not wrong, changed that at the beginning of the 20th century and moved to the Latin alphabet. So some languages have some alphabets in common, so to speak, but that's about it. I think there's also some rivalry, let's put it this way, between the Iran and the Arabic world in general.
Si me permite, ese es el segundo himno nacional de mi patria, se llama Ey Iran, Ey Marze por Gohar,
Y lo cantan.
Bien, yo سوال کنم که شما در آموختن زبان فارسی فقط لغات عادی را یاد گرفتید یا اینکه سعی کردید در فرهنگ فارسی ما رخنه کرده و مثلا بعضی از شعرای ما را نام ببرید.
It's a beautiful language. It sounds beautiful. I have the Asimil book. I never started learning it, but I will. This is just a personal note. But I did not understand anything apart from Farsi. I heard that it's less difficult than Arabic from a European point of view, or better said from my own point of view as a speaker of Italian, because it's a Indo-European language. But apart from that, I don't know much about Farsi, apart from the fact that it sounds beautiful. It has a beautiful culture, and I've met a lot of Iranians in Europe, and they're lovely, lovely people.
Él dice que está feliz de estar acá.
En realidad, está diciéndome que el idioma persa tiene una cultura diferente, es un diccionario, son letras alfabéticas completamente diferentes de cualquier idioma. También para aprender a hablarlo tiene que ser de acuerdo con sus alfabetos.
Lamento, yo no pregunté esto. No,
pero ¿cómo?
Yo pregunté que de cada idioma como Farsi ha tratado de aprender lo cosa diario como está usted, eso, o que ha metido verdaderamente en raíces de nuestro idioma. Por ejemplo, nombre algunas de nuestros grandes poetas, de los grandes literatos, como por ejemplo Sadi.
So this guy points to, he makes an interesting point in the form of a question, and that is, of these languages, of all these languages that you learn, have you gone deep into the culture, or you just you've learned a couple of sentences to just interact with people and have very shallow conversations? And then he asked specifically about Farsi. Did you get deep into the Iranian culture? Do you know about the poets, about the artists, etc., etc.? And this is a question that I get all the time when it comes to being a polyglot. Do you choose breadth? Do you choose depth? Or do you choose both? In my personal case, I have I've committed my life. I've just dedicated my life, and I will dedicate my life to language learning, among other things. But I really like speaking languages well. So speaking languages well means that I can interact with people, that I can have great conversations, but also it means to know the culture of the country. It means to read a lot of books, to listen to podcasts, watch documentaries, to know more about the culture in and of itself, which requires a lot of time, which requires a lot of commitment. And unfortunately, we're all limited. We all have 24 hours a day. So I cannot learn 50 or 70 languages. And for each language, I have to know everything because it's impossible. It's simply impossible to do that for a normal human being. And I consider myself a normal human being. So the trade-off, the compromise is to choose a number of languages. As of now, I've been learning 15 languages, also considering mine. And I try to spend a lot of time delving into the culture because I like it. So it's always a question of what you want to do. On the other hand, I know of polyglots who speak a lot of languages, but they just want to reach an A2 level or a B1 level where you can just have conversations and or interact with people, or maybe just go to a country and say quiero esto por favor, or just very short interactions. That's totally fine. That's a different way of seeing polyglottery, So to each his own, as they say. But this guy has some doubts, and he goes like, okay, you're not performing well. So I'm wondering, have you learned bits and pieces of each language, or can you really did you really get into the culture and know the culture well behind or beyond the language itself?
Какой сегодня день недели?
Какой?
Какой сегодня день недели?
¿Qué le preguntó?
Un momentito.
Si quería algo de caca.
This is Zamorano. He's a very famous football player, especially in Italy. He's very popular because he played for Inter.
Vamos, pues.
Una vez más.
ayudar.
Una vez más.
¿Qué día hoy?
Bien, una cosa.
A ver.
Esos idiomas, en verdad, el croata, porque en verdad no me avisó con televisión que abrí esos idiomas aquí. Porque si me hubiesen avisado con televisión, yo me habría preparado, porque hace más de 20 años que no estoy practicándolos.
So there's a couple of observations I want to make here. The first one is that he did not recognize Russian. So he said, oh, the Croatian. And this goes to show that they did not actually tell him, unless they specified it, that the person was speaking that language. So in this case, he did not know that this guy was speaking Russian. So he heard a Slavic language and he thought, oh, this is Croatian. The second thing is, or the second observation is the fact that, as he said, Ziad Fazah said it himself. He said, okay, wait a second, hold the phone. As Shrek would say, hold the phone with a Scottish accent. He just makes a point that if he had known that they would have, he should have talked to these people, interacted with these people, etc., he would have prepared himself. He would have, listened to these languages or try to have a conversation with himself, whatever. He would have done something. But again, going back to a point I touched upon before, you can maybe fake speaking a language if you learned a few things by heart, or if you learn certain interactions and you know that people are likely to say certain things and you react to them. And I've seen a couple of these so-called polyglots on the internet making, for example, street interviews and so on and so forth. But listening comprehension is way more difficult to fake. The impression I have, because I haven't only watched this video, but I've also seen a lot of other videos that Ziad uploaded on YouTube. He's got a YouTube channel now, but he, at a certain point, I think around 10 years ago, he started uploading videos where he was speaking these languages that he removed. The impression I have is that back in the day, Ziad learned a bunch of languages, which is definitely true, for maybe 3 months, for 3 months. And then he thought, I've learned this language for 3 months, and he was convinced that he actually could speak the language. And the other thing is that the internet did not exist. So nowadays it's way easier to see if a person actually speaks these languages, because we have YouTube, because we have a lot of ways to test these polyglots and to see directly how they react. So he probably deluded himself into thinking that he could actually speak these languages, or that the level he had reached was good enough for him to say, oh, I've learned this language. Then maybe he talked to some journalist, and then he ended up in the Guinness World Records. So again, yes, it's true that the situation is difficult. There's a lot of pressure, and it is difficult already to perform, to do well in a situation where all eyes are on you, you're in the spotlight. Plus, you have to not only understand, but also reply in a language that is not yours, which is Spanish. And so it's difficult, but when it comes to listening comprehension, if you understand a language well, if you reach at least a B2 level, meaning you reach fluency. You can check what B2 level, for those who don't know, means if you just write CEFR evaluation grids, and you will see exactly what it means. If you reach that level, at least a B2 level, then the listening comprehension is forever. This is a strange thing. You can understand a language well. It's like riding a bike, or maybe learning how to drive a car. It's for life once you learn how to do it. And listening comprehension is like that. It's managed by an area in the brain, which is called the Wernicke's area, while Broca is for speaking, for production. So if you understand a language well, it's for life. Yeah, you can maybe not listen to this language for years and years. Maybe you can miss some words here and there because you're not familiar with it anymore. But in reality, you will understand it. It's like your native language once you reach a certain level. But speaking is a different matter. If you don't speak a language even for 3 months, even the languages I know best, like, I don't know, German or French or Russian, if I don't speak them well, if I don't speak them for a long time, then they definitely get rusty. But the higher the level, the easier it is to go back to them, to brush them up, to refresh them. Just, you listen, you speak to yourself, and it comes back. So this is an important point to state, because a person who says, I'm a polyglot, they have to know this stuff.
Excuse me, sir. Let me ask you something. How long have you been in this country?
I arrived yesterday.
Is that right?
Yeah. En todo caso, para su tranquilidad, hoy día es lunes.
Ahora ya entendió bien.
This is a little bit maybe too much, because the guy's already, being under pressure. He's under pressure, and you don't need to add one more negative thing. But this is life. He's in the spotlight. He's in the show, and these are the consequences of saying certain things. Especially at the beginning, I think that people would be more forgiving if he had not started the entire interview by saying he's a divine. Well, I don't remember what he said. He's got a divine talent bestowed upon him by God.
您懂得58种语言，真可谓是语言大师。正因为您所说的，中国普通话是较为困难。那么我向您提一个简单的问题：在地球上，在月球上能够看到唯一的地球上的人造工程是什么？
So Mandarin Chinese sounds pretty exotic if you don't speak it, and the guy spoke quite a lot at length. Again, going back to the point that I was touching upon before, if you don't have enough listening, if you haven't listened to the language enough, if your listening comprehension is not up to par, so to speak, it's difficult to understand, even if it's a relatively simple question. And the more distant the language, the worse this gets. So let's see if Ziad, understood something, all of it, or nothing of what the guy just said.
Algo de salchicha le dijo por allá.
Bueno, a ver, un momento.
去你摇一摇。
在月球上能够看到地球上的唯一的人造工程是什么？
Well, the sweat is getting is transforming itself into a flood. You can see he's pretty concerned now.
Tiene razón. ¿Qué le preguntó?
Sí. ¿Dónde aprendió los conocimientos del idioma chino? Y también en qué lugar usted lo absorbió con facilidad.
He's also being more diplomatic than the Iranian guy. But here again, the comment is that Ziad Fazah probably just thought, okay, let me think about what is the most likely question that this guy asked me. Where did I learn it? Was it difficult or not? And unfortunately for him, that was not the right answer.
Yo, sí, simplemente yo he hecho esa pregunta. ¿Qué obra humana en la Tierra que se ve en la Luna?
La muralla china, pero bueno.
So the lady in the background says the Great Wall of China, but actually this is a myth. I don't think you can see the Great Wall of China from the moon, but you can probably see it on if you are on the ISS, which is a privilege just a few astronauts have, the International Space Station. But I think this is a myth. I also believed in, because people say it all the time from hearsay. Oh, it's true. So it must be true if everybody says it. But no, it's actually not true.
Era por el acento. Pero mire. Muchas gracias, Don Chu.
Oh, that's this guy in the background, the same guy who talked about the camel. Where did he station the camel? Where did he put the camel? He also said, oh, it's probably because of the accent. There's a lot of accents in China, different accents. So he said, oh, maybe it's because of the accent, which is kind of ironic. But it's part of the game.
Sírtate y tranasrotizo, poses meres taminete edostin hili.
This is my favorite language, Greek. I've been learning it for 7 years. And I remember that the first time that I watched this video, I was a little bit lost. I did not understand what she said. I watched it when I did not know Greek at all. Then when I knew something, but I still find it difficult to understand. I had been learning it for like 6 months or something like that, which is not a difficult question, by the way. Now I understand it perfectly, and it puts a smile on my face, because it goes to show that if you learn a language every day for a long period of time, then the magic happens, and any language can open up like a flower, and you get familiar with it, and it's like, this feeling of this sounds so familiar. But I don't know if it sounds familiar to Mr. Ziad.
Fácil.
Παρακαλώ, υπόνητε.
One more time.
Παρακαλώ.
Repeat.
Δεν άκουσα.
She says, "Δεν άκουσα?" I didn't understand. I didn't hear.
Υπόνητε.
Υπομονή.
Sí.
Paciencia, dice.
No. ¿Puedes decir una vez más, por favor?
Una vez más. Y tranasrotizo, poses meres taminete edostin hili.
Tagando de Chile.
Algo de Chile me gustó.
Sí.
Sí.
Now he's really like in a difficult situation. You can tell he's sweating a lot, and he did not understand this either, and he's asking himself, "Oh my gosh, where are we going here? This is getting worse and worse." You can see it from this screenshot or a frame. It's more like a frame than a screenshot, actually, but you get the picture.
Mientras piensan, yo les puedo decir que el griego dicen que el idioma más difícil del mundo que tiene es un abecedario absolutamente a su pinta, ¿no es así?
Mientras tú dices eso, yo lo voy a buscar bien
Fue
aquí.
bien fácil porque yo repetí una pregunta que hizo el Coco.
A ver, perdón.
Yo le pregunté que cuántos días iba a permanecer acá en Chile, que fue la misma pregunta que le hizo el Coco, así que fue pregunta repetida.
Le hizo una pregunta repetida, pero en griego. Yo voy a... Tóqueme la venera, maestro, para hacer un cambio urgente.
A ver, hindi, el hindi.
Yo son what?
¿Qué es eso? ¿Yo soy Omar?
Yo son what? Yo son what?
Dios es vida.
Yo no me acuerdo.
¡Viva lunes!
At least this guy is being nice, and he said something really simple, and it kind of ends up on a nice note, even if I wouldn't call it a nice note actually for Ziad, because this was a public humiliation, but at least it doesn't end that tragically. Phew! That was quite a ride, right? So I just wanted to share a couple of reflections about the video that you've just watched. And the first one is that language learning and languages in general always find a way to humble you. And I think when it comes to learning languages, to talking about learning languages and learning other skills for that matter, you always have to be humble, because humility is always a good virtue to have, considering the fact that what you do not know is always exceeds what you actually do know. And languages are entities that change in time and space. They're really complex. They're really difficult to master. It takes a long time, and one should be definitely humble. The other lesson is about the concept of fluency. Different people have a different idea of what fluency means, and going back to the concept of humility, I think that the more humble you are, the more you know that fluency is a point that takes a long time to reach, because it means to be able to interact with a language in a number of situations and without a problem. Probably for Ziad Fazah, speaking a language fluently means to learn a language for a few months and then being able to interact at what I consider a shallow level, but to each his own, as they say. And the third lesson is about pressure. Pressure makes diamonds. Pressure can make diamonds, but at the same time, a lot of pressure can bring you down. Think about when you are trying to, to ace a test, or you're under pressure because of work, or because a professor is asking you questions, etc., etc. So I think that Ziad Fazah, considering the skills he had back in the day, he actually did a good job, because he was under a lot of pressure. He was on the spotlight, and of course it did not start well, so the pressure was actually mounting, was getting bigger and bigger, and he managed to get his point across in some situations. And anyway, it was a difficult situation. And I believe that the truth will always see the light sooner or later. So that's it. I hope you liked the video, you enjoyed the video, and let me know about your reflections, your thoughts about this specific situation. What do you think? Why do you think fake polyglots say the things they say? It's for glory. It's for selfishness. It's for narcissism. And let's share and compare ideas. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day. Happy language learning, and talk to you soon.